They thought it was just a game, smashing his mailbox over and over, laughing as if destroying a piece of his home was nothing. But for him, it wasn't just a mailbox. It was his land, his dignity, and the only thing standing against an HOA that acted more like cops than neighbors. Each time they struck, they sent a message. You don't belong here. But he had a message of his own, one they never saw coming. What happened next? That's where this story begins. Curtis Johnson had lived on his ranch for years, a quiet stretch of land on the edge of town where he raised horses and worked the soil with pride. For him, the mailbox at the end of the gravel road wasn't just a box of steel. It was a marker of his independence, a symbol that this land was his, hard-earned and paid in full. Each morning, he walked down the path, boots kicking up dust, and pulled out letters and bills like any other homeowner. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his. And that meant everything. But not everyone saw it that way. The HOA Patrol, a group of self-appointed enforcers, had taken it upon themselves to watch him closely, too closely. They drove past more often than they should, their white SUV creeping by like it owned the road. At first, Curtis thought little of it, brushing off the uneasy glances and whispered comments. Yet soon, his mailbox became their target, struck again and again as if to remind him he didn't belong. Each dent wasn't just metal bending, it was a wound to his dignity, a silent message delivered in the dark. And as the pattern continued, Curtis began to realize this wasn't an accident. It was only the beginning of something much bigger. The first time it happened, Curtis told himself it was an accident. A dented mailbox could be explained away, a careless driver, a teenager playing a prank. He replaced the post, bolted it deeper into the ground, and moved on. But when it happened again just days later, he couldn't ignore it. The same white HOO SUV had been spotted idling near his driveway. The hood dented, paint scraped like it had just come out of battle. It wasn't long before it became a routine. Week after week, the mailbox stood no chance. One morning, it leaned sideways, crushed into the gravel. Another night, it was torn completely from the ground, left lying like a broken limb. Each time Curtis repaired it, they came back harder, like they wanted to prove a point. This land wasn't his, not really, not in their eyes. Neighbors whispered about it, but never stepped in. Some shook their heads, muttering, "Just let it go." But Curtis couldn't. He felt the message in every blow. It wasn't just wood and steel they were destroying, it was his right to stand where he stood, his right to belong. Then came the night he heard them. He'd been sitting on his porch when the low hum of an engine crawled down the road. Headlights swept across the pasture, stopping at the edge of his drive. He stayed quiet, watching. The SUV rolled forward, slow and deliberate, until crash. The sound echoed like a gunshot, metal buckling, wood snapping, laughter trailing off into the dark as tires squealed away. Curtis clenched his fists. This wasn't kids fooling around. This was targeted, deliberate, fueled by the same kind of hate that had followed men like him for generations. He felt it in his chest, the sting of being marked, singled out, tested. And yet, the more they struck, the more determined he became. He replaced the mailbox again, but this time he didn't just repair it. He reinforced it, steel instead of wood. Concrete poured deep into the earth, layer upon layer until the post stood solid, immovable. It looked ordinary from the road, but beneath the surface, it was a fortress. Curtis knew what was coming, and he was ready. Days passed. The SUV returned. This time it came faster, barreling down the shoulder like a predator closing in. Curtis braced himself as the headlights narrowed, locked onto their target. The crash rang out again, but this time, the sound was different. A sickening thud, followed by grinding metal and the hiss of steam. He hurried to the edge of the driveway, his heart pounding. There, on the shoulder, the HOA patrol SUV sat crumpled, its hood folded in, smoke rising into the night. And yet, in the center of it all stood the mailbox, perfect, unmoved, untouched. For the first time in weeks, Curtis felt the balance shift. But what he didn't know was that this crash was just the start, and the HOA wouldn't take their humiliation lightly. The wrecked SUV should have been the end of it. Curtis thought maybe, just maybe, they'd finally leave him alone. But the very next night, the patrol returned, this time not with laughter, but with rage. Headlights cut through the dark like knives, sweeping over his porch as engines roared up the road. It wasn't one vehicle now, it was 3. Curtis stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of history pressing down on his chest. He knew this wasn't just about a mailbox anymore. This was about a black man standing his ground on land they believed he shouldn't own. Every dented post, every smashed letterbox had led to this moment. And now they wanted payback. Gravel sprayed as the SUV skidded to a stop. Doors slammed. Heavy boots crunched toward his fence line. He could hear their voices, sharp, mocking, daring him to step outside. He felt the anger surge, but also the fear, because he knew how stories like this often ended. Men like him weren't supposed to fight back. They were supposed to bow their heads, rebuild quietly, and endure. But Curtis didn't move. His heart pounded as he realized the trap wasn't just in the concrete and steel of his mailbox. The trap was in refusing to be erased and standing tall even when every force told him to shrink. Then the silence broke, a sudden rev of an engine, the screech of tires, and a sickening crash that shook the ground. This time, the impact didn't just crumple metal. It sent shockwaves through the neighborhood, a sound too loud to ignore, too violent to dismiss. Curtis stepped forward, staring at the wreckage, at the men scrambling in disbelief. And in that moment, he knew the battle wasn't over, but the balance of power had shifted. The wreckage of that night didn't just sit twisted on the roadside. It lingered in the hearts of everyone who saw it. The HOA patrols, once smug and untouchable, had been forced to face their own humiliation. Their CVs could be replaced, their egos could recover, but for Curtis, the mailbox stood as something far greater than steel and concrete. It was proof that he would not be broken, proof that he had the right to exist, to own his land, and to demand respect. But even in victory, the weight of the moment pressed heavy, because Curtis knew the truth. Not every man in his position lives to see a win. Too often, these stories end in silence, in tragedy, in names added to a growing list of lives cut short or dignity stripped away. His mailbox became a symbol, but the fight it represented was older than him, bigger than one ranch, and still far from over. What happened on that gravel road is more than a story about property damage. It's a story about the quiet, constant ways racism tries to chip away at belonging, one insult, one act of intimidation, one smashed mailbox at a time. And it's a reminder that resilience isn't just about standing tall, It's about refusing to disappear when others try to erase. You, Curtis's stand may seem small to some, but it echoed loudly in a world where silence is often expected. His mailbox stood tall when they tried to knock it down, and now the question is yours. How many more times will people have to fight to prove they belong in their own homes, their own neighborhoods, their own country? If you believe stories like this need to be heard, share this video, leave your thoughts below, and be part of the conversation. Because until the answer is never again, the fight is far from finished.